Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 10th meeting for 2021 of the Justice Committee. And this is set to be our final meeting of the parliamentary session. We have apologies this morning from Rona Mackay, our deputy convener, who is unwell. Can I just say I wish her a full and speedy recovery, and can I just also place on record my thanks to her on behalf of myself and the whole committee for her work during the session as the committee's deputy convener, work that she has dealt with customary good humour and diligence. We're very grateful to you, Rona. Thank you. Our first agenda item this morning is consideration of whether to take items 4 and 5 in private. Are we agreed? We are agreed, thank you. Our second agenda item is consideration of 3 negative SSIs, namely the Scotland Act 1998 Agency Arrangements Specification Overseas Production Orders Order, the Fireworks Scotland Miscellaneous Amendments Regulations, and the Prison and Young Offenders Institutions Coronavirus Scotland Amendment Rules. And I refer members to the relevant paper in our pack, which is a note on these orders by the clerk. And I refer members also to correspondence that we've received from the British Fireworks Association and from the Howard League of Scotland about some of these SSIs. These two are in your papers. So can I take each order in turn? And can I start with the Scotland Act 1998 Agency Arrangements Specification Overseas Production Orders Order? Do members have any comment on that instrument? John Finney's indicated that he wishes to speak. I don't know if it's about this instrument or another one, John. Okay, I'll come to you in a minute. I'll come to you when we get to the third of the orders. Thank you very much, John. Does anybody have any comments on this instrument? Nobody's indicating that they do. So let's move on, if we can, to the Fireworks Scotland Miscellaneous Amendments Regulations 2021. These are the regulations, of course, in respect of which the British Fireworks Association have written to us. Do members have any comments on this instrument? Annabel Ewing, please, and then Liam Kerr. Annabel.
Thank you, Convener. There's been some toing and froing on this in terms of correspondence, and I have read that, but I have to say that I think that the amended regulations are proportionate and meet definitely a need in terms certainly of what my constituents tell me. So I'm very happy to support these regulations. I understand from the perspective of British Fireworks Association what they're saying. However, I'm not really convinced by what they say. And also, I see that they have a 10-point action plan, but it is interesting to note the timing of that plan, I think. So I think, as I say, the regulations are proportionate. They absolutely meet a need, and I'm very happy to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabel. Liam Kerr?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think broadly I understand what Annabel's saying there, and there's no doubt that the public response seems to be largely in favour. And I don't necessarily move away from that, but I do think that there are some questions outstanding here, which I think it would be useful to hear the Minister's response. I don't have it in front of me if there has been one, but I think, Annabel Ewing talks about the timing of the plan, but in terms of timing, there is also the suggestion that the date has moved and it has come back from June to March. And the British Fireworks Association give a reason for that, or they suggest a possible reason. I've no idea whether that's true or not, but I do think it would be quite interesting to hear at some point from the Minister what the reason for that date change is. And the other thing which I do think is interesting, is the British Fireworks Association's suggestion that there is, well, we know there's some existing law, but there is this suggestion that it's not being resourced properly, it's not being enforced properly, and that's a matter that's been raised by a number of stakeholders. And so whilst I'm not going to go against this legislation at this stage, I do think that it would be handy if the Minister would respond to some of these allegations or suggestions, and let us know before the final Parliament is considering this.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. I mean, just a procedural note in terms of what we can do with regard to these instruments, given that they are negative instruments. If any member wants to object then they would have to lay a motion to annul one of these SSIs. They'd need to lodge that motion to that effect with the Chamber Office, and we would then have to schedule an additional committee meeting to discuss the matter with the responsible minister. Similarly, if members have questions that they need answered from the Scottish Government, we can postpone consideration of any of these SSIs and write to them and hold an additional meeting to consider any response. So that's just a procedural note in terms of where we are. I have to say, I personally agree with what Annabel said. I think there's been a lot of toing and froing about this, but it seems to me that the government have called this broadly correctly, and certainly I agree with her that these measures are proportionate. Let me bring in Fulton McGregor, Liam, and then I'll bring you back in a second. Fulton.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I broadly agree with what you and Annabel have said, and I just wanted to reflect that back from my constituents, because I think, like all of us, I imagine that we're pretty inundated around certain times of the year with fireworks inquiries. So I actually think there's probably a public appetite for the restrictions around fireworks to go much further. But it's clear that that I think the Scottish Government have tried to strike a proportionate balance to take into account some of the concerns that we heard from the British Fireworks Association and others, but there's probably a public appetite actually there to go further, certainly from some of the queries that I received. So I do think that they are proportionate, and I will be backing them.
Thank you, Liam. I'll bring in Liam MacArthur next, and then back to Liam Kerr, please. Liam MacArthur.
Thanks, convener. Largely to echo the points that you, Annabel, and Fulton have made. I think we have had quite a bit of back and forth. These are issues that have been generally aired. I know there's a frustration about measures that are taken forward through secondary legislation. There are limits in terms of what can be done through the scrutiny process. But I think these are issues that, through the work in the Chamber of the Parliament, have had a fairly solid airing, and there are those who, as Fulton says, would wish to see us go further. I think the proposals are generally proportionate, and therefore on that basis I would be content to support the SSI.
Thank you very much, Liam. Liam Kerr, please.
Just briefly, convener, I'm grateful to you bringing me back in. I don't disagree with anything that we've heard there, not at all, and I certainly won't be looking to push the process out any further. I just raise that I would just be interested in the Minister's response to some of those questions, but no, I certainly don't disagree with what we've heard there.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, this is all on the record, and we can certainly draw this to the attention of the Minister's officials, Liam, if that would reassure you. But I think that concludes the comments that members wanted to make on this instrument. So can we move on finally to the Prisons and Young Offenders Institutions Coronavirus Scotland Amendment rules, which John Finney wanted to speak about. John.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, convener. And like others, it's not my intention to prolong procedures in relation to this, but I think the letter we've received from Howard League, who I often find myself aligning with, raises some important issues. Prisons and Young Offenders Institutes are very unique establishments, and it's right that there's rigorous monitoring. We know from what we've heard that for close to 24 hours for the last 18 months is the circumstances that people have found themselves in. But I think the most pertinent point that's been raised by the Howard League in relation to what is effectively legislation, it's very clearly, this is the law of the land we're about to, is that the consultation was entirely internal. Now, that's worrying. It is. We hear the phrase a lot lately of marking your own homework. Well, this is making up your own rules. Now, I do not question the integrity or intention of other than to have safe establishments by the Scottish Prison Service. However, it does look entirely insular, and I think we need a broader examination than including the Inspectorate, including the Scottish Human Rights Commission. Volunteering views, seeking views from others, from the staff associations, for instance. So, whilst I don't intend to oppose it, I think that there are points raised here that I hope people would have regard to. And if the opportunity is to have an earlier review and revise some of these, then I think that would be a very positive way to go on. I'll conclude my remarks there. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say that I don't always agree with Mr. Finney about everything, but can I just associate myself with those remarks, with every one of them. When I read the correspondence from the Howard League, I was really quite disturbed that this was a sort of measure that was being dealt with by a negative instrument. Now, absolutely not our place to turn negative instruments into affirmative ones, but it does seem to me that this is making changes to, or continuing, in effect, changes to conditions of imprisonment, not only in prisons, but also in young offenders institutions, that are really serious and that deserve full and proper scrutiny. And I'd really like to associate myself with what Mr. Finney has just said. Two other members have indicated that they wish to come in. Can I take Rhoda Grant first, please? And then after Rhoda Grant, it will be Liam MacArthur. Rhoda.
I absolutely agree with everything John Finney said, and I suppose that leaves us with the question about, other than voting against this and moving against it, what options do we have, given that we're coming to the end of the Parliament? And I think there's a wider issue here about scrutiny of government action when the Parliament goes into recess for the election, and how do we, at such a crucial time, we are being prevented from scrutinising this kind of thing. So can we maybe write to the Cabinet Secretary just expressing our deep concern about this and the lack of scrutiny and consultation, and kind of ongoing scrutiny over the recess period? And possibly, I noticed the Howard League also copied in the Scottish Human Rights Commission into their letter, and I think maybe we should let the Scottish Human Rights Commission know of our concern as well, because there's very little we can do given the time frame other than to vote it down, which I think would probably be irresponsible, but there are really big issues at stake here.
Yeah, as I understand it, Rhoda, there's no opportunity that the committee has today to vote against. These are negative instruments, not affirmative instruments. So if any member wanted to push these instruments to a vote, they would need to lodge a motion to that effect, which would then be debated in the chamber. But of course, we can certainly write to the Cabinet Secretary, recording the concerns that have been expressed by a range of members now about these matters. Can I bring in Liam MacArthur, and then after Liam MacArthur, it will be Fulton McGregor, please. Liam.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. Like Rhoda, I wholeheartedly agree with the concerns laid out by John Finney. I would, in a sense, contrast what we're dealing with in relation to this SSI with the previous one we've disposed of. I think while there have been general debate take place about the emergency provisions that have had to be put in place as a result of COVID restrictions, I think the decision to move ahead with the extension of these restrictions in the context of young offenders institutes has not had a similar airing. I would attach considerable weight to the views of staff in those establishments, but there are other views that need to be heard, and I think that's all the more important when we're dealing with a negative instrument as opposed to an affirmative instrument. I think Rhoda's absolutely right that we find ourselves in a bind here, not helped by the fact that we're in the dying days of this parliamentary session. I don't think we really have an alternative in a practical sense other than to pass this SI, but I would want to make sure the committee is stating in terms our dissatisfaction with the way that this has been handled, and simply saying you've consulted internally and then informed the other stakeholders. The fact that you've taken the steps to inform the other stakeholders rather suggests that you believe that they have an interest and a perspective on the content of this SI. So I think it's highly regrettable. I'm very pleased that the Howard League Scotland have set out very clearly their dissatisfaction and concerns around the process, and I think we as a committee need to reflect that to the Cabinet Secretary and probably to the Scottish Prison Services as well.
Okay, thank you. Liam, can I bring in Fulton McGregor, please? Fulton.
Thanks, Convener. Again, I'm just taking the opportunity really to echo what others have said. I'm glad that John Finney raised this, and then I would completely agree with what others have said. As somebody in a previous job. I used to have to visit young offenders institutes fairly regularly. I'm surprised in a sense that that they are quite serious changes in how they're presented today. At the same time, I find myself completely where Rhoda Grant and others are, in that I will be voting or backing that these instruments go through today, because I don't think it's right not for them to go through. But a letter to the Cabinet Secretary, to get some more information on the thinking and more views and perspectives, as Liam said, I think would be useful, because it is quite significant changes.
I'm grateful to all of the members who've contributed to the discussion of this SSI. I think all of the members of the committee who've spoken about this are agreed that we should write in quite strong terms to the Cabinet Secretary, setting out the concerns and reservations that the committee has. But with that, I think that concludes our consideration of these SSIs. Thank you. Our next agenda item is feedback from the subcommittee, and the subcommittee has held meetings recently on the 1st and on the 15th of March on the issues of Brexit and with the new chair of the SPA. Can I invite John Finney to make a verbal report, and then if any members have questions, they can indicate in the usual way. John.
Thank you, Convener. I'll be brief, and as ever, be happy to take questions. As you say, Convener, it was the 1st of March that we took evidence from Deputy Chief Constable Will Kerr and Assistant Chief Constable Patrick Campbell on Brexit and policing. And this updated a previous meeting that had taken place prior to the transition period on the 21st of December. That previous meeting was in October of last year. And we received an update, and it's fair to say that there's a willingness across law enforcement to try and make existing arrangements work, but they are suboptimal, I think is the term, in some respect. Our next session, indeed, was our final session was yesterday, when we heard from the new chair and the new chief executive, Mr. Martin Evans and Ms. Lynn Brown, on the priorities for the SPA going forward. And we also yesterday, and we covered a range of matters that had been undertaken in previous meetings, not least scrutiny of issues around the purchase of the drones and body-worn cameras, issues like that. We agreed a legacy report, and this reflected a range of scrutiny that's taken place excuse me, since 2016. The further information on these, of course, will be available in the official reports. And finally, the subcommittee recently agreed a draft report on the scrutiny of the use of remote piloted aircraft systems and body-worn cameras by Police Scotland. And that report, I think, will be of great interest to members, not least the proposed proliferation and use and the implications around that. And that report will be published later this week. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you very much, John. No member has indicated that they have any questions. So can I just formally and personally thank John for his outstanding work chairing the Justice Subcommittee on Policing. He and all of its members have made a tremendous contribution to oversight of the police and the SPA, particularly, as we've just heard, in relation to the introduction and use of new technologies. And can I just say, I'd like to wish John a very happy and fruitful retirement as he stands down from Parliament in the next weeks. We will all miss his informed and reasoned contributions to our work. He's been a member of the Justice Committee for many years. John, thank you very much for your contributions. Liam McArthur. Liam McArthur, please.
Thanks very much. I don't know whether John wanted to come back in there, but I know we're about to go into private session. So in the absence of Rona Mackay, who I'm sure would have been piping up at this stage, can I put on record the gratitude certainly of myself, and I'm sure of committee colleagues, for your convenership of the Justice Committee. I know it's not been a long tenure, but it certainly covered some fairly kind of thorny issues, and I think the way in which you've assisted the committee and colleagues to navigate our way through that has been greatly appreciated. So thank you very much indeed, and very best luck in your own as a retirement. I think would be inappropriate, but you'll move on to the next phase and the next challenges.
It's very kind of you to say that, Liam. Thank you very much. I also want to put on the record my tribute to Margaret Mitchell, who's deputy convener of the subcommittee and a long-standing convener of the Justice Committee. And I'm sure that we all wish her well too, and thank her for all her work on justice matters. And finally, by way of thank yous, but most importantly of all, can I just take the opportunity once again on all of our behalves to thank Stephen Imrie and Katrina Venters and all their staff, the staff who work for the committee, the staff in SPICE who've worked for the committee, all of the parliamentary staff who've supported me in the short time that I've been convener and supported the committee for a long time. It's been a tough, long session for them, and I'm massively in their debt, a debt that will never be repaid, although I have promised them lunch when that's legally permitted. I think they get a bit of a rest while Parliament goes into recess, so I hope they make the most of it, because I fear they're going to be every bit as busy in session 6. Well, thank you very much. I now close this public part of the meeting, and we will move into private session for the last time this session. Thank you.